Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Arkham horror of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka sampling the entire audio track of the film Sin City before the breakdown hits.
And I am the black metal guy, aka Haunter of the Barrow, Lich Lord of the Baron Undertomb.
Are you just going for, like, fucking cool, like, black metal guy names now?
Yes, I think that's gonna be my new gimmick.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah.
your dreadful phylactery under your apartment.
Exactly. It produces I think the effect is known as bathos, but in reverse. Usually it's, I'm supposed to say the really over the top, sort of earnest fantasy black metal thing, and you're supposed to sort of come in with the funny joke. And then I look silly, but we're reversing the effect, so the bathos is generated in reverse time.
Yeah, I was about to say it's like it would comedically make way more sense in reverse, but I control the recording, so I control the universe. All right, guys, we're back, and thanks to all the people who have kind of picked up on us. Big shout out, want to say first and foremost, big shout out to the guys in Crust. The Vietnamese black metal band who we reviewed last episode, who promoted the hell out of our podcast. The guys in Cimetiere did also.
That's true. I think we picked up probably like 5 new listeners not in the band from Vietnam and other places, and people who just knew Crust somehow.
I've got this huge list of new likes on the Facebook page that all have a lot of letters that I don't know how to pronounce.
Yeah. Hails to Crust.
Yeah, hails to the whole Hanoi black metal scene for supporting us and, listening beyond just covering their band. And those are great guys. We've been talking back and forth with them. Super cool dudes. And really looking forward to hopefully covering some more stuff from the Vietnamese scene now that we have a contact out there.
Yeah, I checked out. There's a more sort of grim cult black metal from their area that I checked out, and it's solid. I can see there being some energy here. They're playing gigs also. I saw on Instagram.
Yeah, which is sick.
You're allowed to play shows in Vietnam, so bands, if you're looking to tour,
Vietnam is the place to go.
Get up the yes, exactly.
Southeast Asia is like the new party spot. So, real quick, with the regular housekeeping at the top, if you enjoy our content, you want to hear more, like, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or something like that. And if you want to do the social media thing, you can get us on Facebook at Terminus Podcast or on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. I love how exactly what we intended is happening. Like the fan bases, like the type of people that are on the Facebook versus the Instagram are just like perfect for our personalities,
That's true, although there is some epic shitposting on Instagram. I was telling you the other day.
Yeah, you were telling me about that.
Those weird Scandinavian kids. Yeah.
Oh, dude, we're going to have to get in touch with them.
One of them finally followed me back.
Oh, thank God. So. Follow for follow.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you guys really like our content to an unhealthy degree, check us out over on Patreon or Subscribestar, where a $3 donation gets you access to all the Terminus Prime bonus episodes. We've got some really cool stuff lined up for that in the coming weeks. And $5 and up allows you into the Terminus Black Circle, where you can get drunk and talk about metalcore with us on Discord.
Yeah, aren't you now sort of getting drunk on Discord on Friday nights?
Yeah, I'm trying to make that a thing. I'm trying to make, drunk after work Friday night Discord sessions a thing. We usually, me and a couple of the guys we'll get on like Watch together, and we'll throw songs in the queue of just like weird shit from the past that we like to show new stuff off, and
nice.
Just kind of talk shit, hang out with the bros,
All right, I'm gonna have to join one of those.
Yeah, soon. Touch each other's cocks and honor them in the Vice style. we got something a little special to start us off before we get into our block of albums. So how about you run us through what we're doing at the top of the hour?
Yeah. So this is a new. We've got a submission again from OG of the band Oppression, who got in touch with us a while ago to send us his work. We reviewed it on the show and we really liked it.
It's actually just Oppress.
Oh, sorry. Oppress, yes.
Yeah.
I was confusing that with Oppressive Descent. No, there's Oppressive Descent, and then there's a good band from Montreal that's like sort of black punk called Oppression.
There's also an outstanding old tech death band called Oppressor.
Well, geez. All right. So some from Oppress, and he's got this sort of crew or group called K.V.N.T Kolektiv. K.V.N.T. with periods between the letters, don't get it twisted. Collective with a K and a V and stuff like that. And this is Kovid 666, the K.V.N.T Compilation 2020. So he sent that to us, and he always requests our cruelest remarks. So
God, I love it every time he says that.
Yeah, no, this guy really gets it. So we are going to sample this comp in the way that you normally sample a comp. That is, we're going to listen to 5 tracks that we choose based on having cool or promising titles, and we're going to listen to them and sample them for you until we have an opinion.
All right. So, what should we do to start? We should probably just start with the opening one, because that seems pretty cool. Cloak of Hex, swallow
all one
the
word.
Earth. Yeah, swallow the earth, extinguish the stars.
Cloak of Hex, all one word, is what happens when screamo meets cult black metal, right?
Yeah, like hopefully really cult black metal. Cloak of Hex.
Yeah.
All right, fuck it. Let's give it a try, and let's just roll in on 3, 2, 1, go. So yeah, that's all right. So I get it. So he's doing kind of like he's trying to do kind of a raw noise, like a raw black aesthetic sort of Japanese noise sound. You know, there's a lot of
kind of like the Viol Parla Signe, which was
this is
also
definitely
a collective band.
Yeah, this is definitely more in the vein of something like Merzbow. Although obviously it's got this whole like kind of ratchet like raw, you know, got this distorted vocals in there and everything. So it's also pulling from kind of like YouTube power electronics and shit like that.
Oh yeah, no, Viola Parla Signe is more like coming to this noise black aesthetic from black metal. Like, how do you incorporate noise into black metal? This is like, how do you do something? How do you generate black metal feelings with noise?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the idea.
I don't have any. You're much more familiar with this sort of stuff than I am, but I'll say relative to a lot of black noise stuff, I found that far more competent on the noise angle of it.
Oh yeah, because he's doing like analog stuff there. He's playing with pedals in real time. It's
not just hissing sounds.
Well, yeah, it's also the problem. There's a lot of like good digital noise stuff, but the problem is like you lose that sort of like organic body effect. You can hear he's like twisting knobs and creating those, huge kind of fluctuations in pitch on the fly and shit, which just gives it more energy.
Yeah, there were some cool just tones there that were difficult to listen to in a way that, very often black and death metal no longer are. So I'm okay with that.
All right, so what's next up? What strikes you? Because I've got mine in mind already.
I'm going to go with anything that looks like Old English, so let's go for Best Swicon, Blood Oath.
All right, let's give that a shot. 3,
All right.
2, 1, go. Okay, that's fucking tight, man. That's a lot of fun. I like that. Actually, that reminds me of a lot of a band that I think that you hate. Although I don't think anyone cares about it anymore, which would be Hot Graves.
Oh, God. Way back in the day. I can't really remember how they sound, but I thought Hot Graves was more like a sort of beefy arena crust with superficial black metal aesthetics or something.
The real early stuff, I knew those guys to a degree, and I didn't really follow them through their career, but their real early demos were a lot more kind of garage rocky like that.
Oh.
Yeah, they're really good actually. But that's a lot of fun. Immediately, you could just say, "Oh, it's Bonal, but with riffs." But I think what it really sounds like is inspired by the Legion Blowtown stuff from Yorkshire, which is the specifically UK sort of more earthy, more black metal harmony based kind of take on the Bonal sound. Some of those Yorkshire bands are still a little mannered for me, like maybe too into the noise or the weirdness. But I really like that general idea of that label and some of the bands on it. The latest, what was it? I'm gonna briefly blank on the name of the main band. White Metal. The latest White Metal I liked a lot. But this has a lot of things. This is kind of like what I always wanted that Yorkshire sound to sound like. Oh, okay. I guess it's just more unrestrained and just like partying,
Well, I think it's best when they crank up the punk and oi to the max, and this also has a sort of epic. It gets a bit of that black metal epic feel in there.
Yeah. I just really like the idea of using these more guttural vocals instead of the kind of shrieky thing you would expect.
Yeah, the guttural vocals were great. White Metal does that some, but but these are real growls. I love the guttural vocals, and I like the well-chosen kind of definitely minor scale kind of Earth AD kind of riffing. Yeah.
All right, so next up, actually the very next track, because they got a fucking emoji in their name, Kagoshima Tangerine.
This is 9 minutes and 20 seconds.
Oh, let's see if it gets to something relatively quickly. So let's give it a shot. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, that's pretty tight too, actually.
I really liked that.
Yeah, I thought with the very beginning with like the field recordings, and I actually skimmed through a little bit more just to see if there's like a big change. But they do these kind of field recording things that remind me a lot of late Gary Gay Gay Gay, like Endless Humiliation and stuff, which is a fucking amazing record that you should check out. I think you'd really appreciate it because it's like improvised piano piece with the main guy just recorded a homeless, like, alcoholic Japanese man kind of mumbling to himself, and that's the whole album. So obviously I love it.
Interesting. I guess that's sort of like what I would assume it would be like from that band name. But when I heard the band name, I guess I assumed it would be more just like spastic Japanoids or something.
That's their early stuff, Gary. Yeah, that's their early stuff, and then their later stuff, they got more kind of like sullen and ambient.
Nice. Well, so with this Kagoshima thing, I think, I don't know that I have, obviously, as you were saying, Tangerine Dream is probably a background inspiration here.
Yeah.
What it sounds like to me is an attempt to do, or not an attempt because it does it, but it's like dark ambient but with more melodic color than you normally get.
Yeah.
More like notes in it.
I think you get that from the Japanese scene, because a lot of these noise artists in Japan ended up moving in a kind of more ambient direction as they kind of continued in their careers. They got more into minimalism versus maximalism. But this also has like a almost a black metal feel. Like this has like an LLN ambient project feel to it, which is cool.
Yeah, that kind of big, kind of chromatic lift in the chords at the end, that like that definitely had a bit of a black metal drama thing to it. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I've been listening, when I haven't been listening for the show, I've mostly been listening lately to like neo-folk and ambient stuff.
Yeah.
Changing it up and good for the weather. And I've been, getting back into, or listening more, exploring more with Kammerheit and Tor Lundvall. And this kind of has aspects of both of those. I think Tor Lundvall does really beautiful, subtle synth work, and this reminds me of that a bit.
All right, so what's next up?
Gosh. Let's go with, we've already reviewed Oppress, so none of you.
Yeah.
Let's go with, I'm torn between two cool names. Let's Bihargam or Sliagach, which probably is pronounced like slay,
I like Bihargam because the song title is The Shadow Egg, and that sounds tight. So let's try that one.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
For sure.
3, 2, 1, go. That's pretty tight.
Yeah, that's why I listen to this music.
Yeah, and from Kentucky, which is, I mean, Kentucky's got some pretty cool stuff, but it mostly...
Kentucky's got a really good scene, yeah.
Yeah, it's I know like a lot of kind of brutal death bands from like kind of the Kentucky, Tennessee, and like Carolina area. And
a lot of good Black and Death from Lexington.
Yeah, they've kind of got their own thing going on there. But no, that's good. That's super Ackercock, which is such a weird thing to hear.
And yeah, they've come up a few times on the show. They're one of those bands that kind of like, one of those kind of techie bands that actually really interests me.
Yeah.
I know you don't like them that much. I like them, although they're a difficult band.
I respect them. It's not my taste, you know?
For sure, yeah. And this is like one thing Ackercock had that makes it not so adaptable. We've talked about this on the show before, but not so adaptable to contemporary tastes. Why DSO took off and they didn't, in some sense, would be they're cursed in their earlier stuff. Like you were mentioning, Go to Mendes. They were cursed with kind of clicky production, like Brutal Death, early 2000s Brutal Death production, and also they had this kind of extremely eclectic riffing pool. This seems to like distill like the Ackercock feeling and just make it chug, which is cool.
Yeah, it turns Ackercock into goat whore, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, or bolt thrower.
Yeah.
It's like a Killing Joke bolt thrower riff, which sign me up.
So last
right,
one. Let's see, because I'm inclined to say Nemoom's Dread. That just seems weird and cool. Do you have an opinion?
Well, I've had two, so.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah,
let's do Nemoom with Dread.
Nemoom is a cool name.
That is cool. All right.
Yeah, all right.
3, 2, 1, go.
Maybe just because we were listening to we have the Dresden streams coming up later, but I would, to me, some of those harmonies hit kind of like Indian classical music. Not that I know shit about Indian classical music. I've just
it's just kind of like accidentally hitting those kind of microtonal characters.
Yeah, maybe it's the microtone drone. And it has this kind of open rhythm, but there's a bit of a pulse to it, like a sway back and forth kind of thing. Yeah, I wouldn't I don't know if I'd seek this out, but I would listen to it for sure. I'd probably get something out of finishing it.
I get into moods where that's the kind of thing I seek out. It's just, it's a palate cleanser creatively. I love that.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, though that's 5 tracks, but there's a total of 20. So you guys can get this at Name Your Price at the KVNT Kolektiv Bandcamp. We'll link it below in the
I'm a little annoyed we didn't find one we didn't like.
Yeah, I thought there would be somewhere it's like it just sucks in 30 seconds. Like, no, it's all pretty cool stuff. Like, this is well curated.
Yeah, and
and in the words of OG, no money raised from the sale of this compilation will go to any charity whatsoever, which is fucking sweet.
Just so you can be sure your money is being well spent.
Exactly. Purely on drugs.
Yeah, purely, yeah. So drugs and sort of esoteric pornography.
Yeah. So thanks a lot to OG for sending this to us, man.
Yeah,
he's been really cool.
And this is a very, well-curated aesthetic, very different sounds, but you can hear the common threads, which is cool.
Yeah, I like the idea of because doing noise or ambient music in this sort of black metal continuum is old hat, but I like that they're pulling from more interesting places in that field. Because, you've got plenty of stuff that sounds like emit or whatever, but there's not a lot of, kind of black noise that's pulling from Jandek or from, like, real Japanese noise or stuff like that.
Yeah, it sounds like these are people who are more familiar with the noise and post-industrial traditions and are also take black metal seriously, which is new.
Yeah, that's good. So, thanks a lot to OG. So finally, for albums, we've got kind of an eccentric episode today. Would you say?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, very well. Yes, although also divides nicely into two chunks. I think, sort of.
Yeah, it does. So I've got first pick today, which is going to be the new Goratory album, Sour Grapes, which is out on Everlasting Spew Records. Great band name. I mean, a great label name. And it looks like this is an Italian label who's doing a lot of kind of modern brutal death stuff. It seems like a lot of it might be on kind of the techie side. And I wasn't familiar with them until now, but I'll definitely be checking them out. And Goratory, if you're not familiar, a Massachusetts techie brutal death grind band who did their last album, I believe, in 2004 and are just coming back 16 years later to do a new one. So what have you got next?
The next is Yersin's Guilt. Yersin, I'm sure, as in Yersinia pestis, Black Death, or whatever. So, this is a band that sort of seems like a grind band, at least at first glance, from northern England, from the area around Newcastle, and from Sunderland. And
they reached out to us on this one, didn't they?
Yeah. So Rob, the guitarist, got in touch with me on Instagram, and I was like, okay, let's see what you got. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this is interesting. So it's grind that has, or it's grindish stuff that draws from a lot of genres we like, and that I think it incorporates black metal in a way that suggests that the guitarist actually really likes black metal, which is rare in, you can imagine all these god-awful sort of, quote, blackened novelty acts that cropped up around 2010 or whatever, right? So this sounds different from that in a way that I think is good and has a lot of promise.
Okay. And then next up, we have They Came From Visions with Cloak of Darkness, Dagger of Night, a band from Kiev, Ukraine, released on Blood Red Distribution. This is the first record by that band. And this was a last-minute switch out because the other album we were going to review on my side got pushed back a week. I still don't fucking understand. It's like, just release it digitally, whatever. But okay, here we are. And this was actually nice because this ended up pairing very well with your choice for the last record.
Yeah, so, this was also a fan service moment. Our patron Josh got in touch a long time ago and suggested a couple things for us to review, or he was interested in us reviewing them. And I was looking for a second band for this time, and I went back to that list, and I found this Dressed in Streams. This record is called Swaraj, or Self-Rule. And it's out on Colloquial Sound Recordings. You may have heard of Colloquial Sound Recordings in connection with A Pregnant Light, which is this kind of very, very hardcore influenced, kind of high-intensity post-black stuff with an Americana vibe. And the guy who runs that label, Damian Master, has sort of gotten known for yanking people's chains in various ways. So this is on his label. It may or may not be him. And it is kind of, Indian nationalist black metal centered on the 40s and 50s struggle for independence era, really influenced both by this kind of post-hardcore thing and Slavic black metal.
Alrighty, so definitely an eclectic show. Let me take a quick break, and because we had such a long segment, and we'll jump into our first record.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
Alright, Goratory's Sour Grapes. This time we're opening up with the Brutal Death record rather than closing with it. And as usual, on things like this, I'm interested in your overall thoughts, because I'll get a little bit into the history of the band and stuff, but this is a fucking beast of a record, isn't it?
Yeah. This was, strangely, although I described this as more accessible on the absolute scale than a number of things we've listened to on the brutal death, tech death, slam side of things, I definitely found it a lot harder to get my hooks in than some of the other stuff. This is, oh yeah, here's my comment. I find a lot of this record disorienting and borderline unlistenable, and I should. If death metal is going to survive, it needs to go DEFCON 5 and activate the perimeter turrets, right?
Yeah.
It's got to, and so it's really doing that here. I think this is so specifically death metal. There's no. You're going to talk more about this too, I know, but I agree. This is something we've been talking about in an ongoing way, right? How does death metal not get engulfed by black metal?
Yeah.
None of that going on. It is... I think it's calibrated... the kinds of melodies and rhythms, just the way it's structured musically, are calibrated more precisely than my ears can handle, or differently precisely than what my ears are used to.
It's a lot to take in.
It's literally hard to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. Like, when I was first listening to this, I kept finding myself getting distracted. And then I was like, it's not because it's boring music or whatever, right? It was just...
Your brain gives up.
Yeah. It's ADHD in the opposite way that I am. And so I had to, like, really try to focus on it. And when I did that, of course, it did pay off more. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so what are... I thought it made sense to lead with these guys, first because it's impressive, second because they're kind of a major band, right? Or they've been in big bands.
Yeah, so Goratory is interesting. So Goratory is, like, it even says this on the Bandcamp page. Goratory had this weird thing where so many of the guys that were early parts of this band went on to be part of major bands. Like, the bassist ended up in the Black Dahlia Murder. The original drummer, ended up in Abnormality, a pretty big modern brutal death metal band. And now the current members are, current members of, like, Job for a Cowboy. The vocalist was in an unfortunately forgotten band called Sexcrement, which was a really excellent band that more people should have been into. And Darren on drums is, was also in Deeds of Flesh and Pillory and some other, like, techie brutal death bands. So this sort of became, Goratory sort of became this proving ground for the New England death metal scene, where guys would go on to bigger things. But Goratory themselves, they did a couple albums early on that were good, very kind of techie death grind stuff, but then the important one was their last album before they kind of ended things initially, which is called Rice on Suede in 2004, which is just a really outstanding kind of technical death grind record, which really just, like, really got noticed because it punched up the extremity. And I think an important thing, which I'm going to touch on later, they kept the music fucking angry. And that's something that stays on Sour Grapes 16 years later. So it's interesting to see these guys come together And it's now that they're coming back together, it's almost like a super group unintentionally. It was, it's mostly the same guys, but now it's an ex post facto super group. You know?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's like an old funeral reunion.
Yeah, exactly. So,
which should happen.
Oh, it should. I fucking love it.
Wouldn't that be? Oh my god, drunk Abbott and Varg drinking milk on one stage.
Yeah,
with the guys from those Sweeteth or what? No, not Sweeteth. But who else went on from that?
I thought Necro Butcher.
It's a Norwegian band.
I thought Necro Butcher was an old funeral.
Interesting.
Let's see. It was Abith and a drummer no one cares about, and they had like a bunch of personnel.
Yeah, I think Abith and Varg weren't in it at the same time.
Yeah, Demonaz was in at one point. Varg was in it. Yeah, and Jorn.
I guess
Hades Almighty.
Oh, word, cool. I guess Nihilist would be the equivalent for Sweden.
Yeah, I guess. So,
anyway, back to Goratory.
Yeah. So this is honestly, I was really impressed by this record, and I think that it does a lot of things that hopefully people in the death metal scene will take notice of, because like we've been talking about a little bit when we've been covering these brutal death records on the past few episodes, that brutal death is really the way forward for death metal. I think we kind of agree on that.
Yeah, death metal is brutal, therefore brutal death.
Exactly. But these guys...
It's like, I prefer my black metal grim.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think there's a lot of cool musical ideas on this, and just kind of meta-atmospheric ideas about it that are very cool. But let me just... let's open up with a sample. Actually, both the samples that I chose were... actually, your sample's first, isn't it?
Well, yeah, so I thought this might be just for sort of comedy purposes, this being an example of me hearing this and being like, what the fuck?
Oh, sure, let's try it out.
This was sort of the first moment where I could sort of get situated.
Okay.
All right, so this is off of Losing Streak.
All right, let's give this a shot. Fuck, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think I get it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've also had about I've also started drinking beer at this point. So my mind is sped up to sort of
the appropriate tempo for the shit. God damn, the vocal performance on this record is outstanding. It's so, like, searingly fucking aggressive.
Do they have a standalone vocalist, or is he playing?
No, he's a standalone vocalist. But they used to have two vocalists when they first started. But Oh man, just the like sawing, like fucking like clipping the mic out, just extremity of the vocals, and which really merges with the kind of like New England hardcore feel that a lot of this has.
Oh my god, yeah, that last bit, the mosh count offs, the cymbal work, just the grooves. What I was thinking, like, what is New England death metal? Because I don't know, and to me, when I hear something like this, I think, so is it like Berkeley School of Music plus Hatebreed? Because like the end, that's just a really complicated hardcore breakdown.
Yeah.
Not needlessly complicated. It just has like it's a breakdown with a plot.
Yeah. No, I think so. I don't think New England death metal has this like very particular sound. But I just think that it's more a result of the kind of like New England heavy music scene, because obviously New England has this super fertile hardcore and metalcore scene. Like a lot of the metalcore bands that were huge when we were in high school, for instance, were coming out of New England.
I was like, because this is the job for a cowboy. Okay, then I was like, is this the red chord? Yup, it's the red chord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the red chord.
And in fact, I saw the red chord open for Converge back in the day.
I saw the red chord open for Guar one time. That was very odd. Red chord fucking rule. But yeah, so there's the whole death metal kind of style up there was very openly influenced by hardcore and metalcore, but they mostly used it. They used it for breakdowns here and there, but it was mostly about spazzy technicality. And there's still bands doing stuff up there. Like there's a great band from Boston called Dysentery who do just like merciless slamming Hatebreed, basically. They're outstanding. There was a great band called Terminally You're Aborted Ghost, which was an attempt to do. They basically attempted to do Jane Doe brutal death, and I like them a lot.
That sounds good.
Oh yeah, that was fucking awesome.
Terminally Your Aborted Ghost or Terminally You're Aborted Ghost?
Terminally Your.
Because you don't want to get a your abortion.
So, yeah, no, I think, I guess if there is a sound, yeah, it really is just the feeling of New England hardcore and metalcore filtered into brutal death.
Yeah, New England hardcore and metalcore is like background assumptions.
Yeah, they
nothing
grew
about
up around it. Yeah.
Yeah, I somewhere it says that they're influenced by like Cryptopsy, and we were talking about how Cryptopsy almost anticipates some of that Hatebreed stuff.
Yeah.
And so like this is kind of there's no for the people who worry about that sort of shit, there's no quote core here. This is just
obviously it's a background information, but it's not. There's not like breakdowns in the way that you would think of them. And there's also this, talking about Cryptopsy, there's this whole thread between New England and kind of the Montreal scene where I think they're kind of informing each other. Because Montreal produced Cryptopsy, and they produced a lot of very cool kind of like techie deathcore and kind of mathcore bands and stuff. So I think they were all in kind of communication with each other.
I'll tell you, man, that Montreal has the highest, ton of used, at least back in the day, who knows what it's like now, but ton of used record stores and the highest concentration of King Crimson CDs relative to other CDs I've seen in any city.
I'll keep that in mind when I need my King Crimson fix.
Yeah.
Alright, let me throw out another sample. Track titles on this are outstanding.
Yes.
And actually, the two samples that I picked are both off the lead singles. I knew that this first one was, but apparently the second one wasn't. Singles in metal, they seem to get it more. They usually are the best songs on the album. So here's one that is off a song about basically putting laxatives in LSD and feeding it to hippies at Burning Man.
Oh, God, I love it.
And this is a song called I Shit Your Pants. So let's try that.
That might be the song title of the year.
Let's give it a shot.
Doesn't it sound like a foreign sort of, a foreign curse?
Yeah.
I shit your pants!
And an old gypsy curse. Let's give it a shot. Fuck yeah.
That's so cool.
I love I love how there's just tech death breakdowns on this record. It's like doing the same things that cool, more kind of like old school tough guy hardcore breakdowns do, but just with way more going on, but still having the immediate punch your friend effect.
Yeah, which is like Cryptopsy, although that was again before a lot of that old school tough guy hardcore. Coalesced, but like breakdowns that have melodic contours to them.
They're a meaningful part of the song. They're not just the breakdown.
Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be really fun to see this with you, bro, but I'd have to keep my guard up.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I would immediately just like tombstone pile driver you into the floor of the pit. So, but what I think is really interesting.
Not if I dodge.
You're the skinny guy, you're agile, light on your feet. But so what I think is really great about this is there's a lot of ideas that you would hear in kind of like I don't know, how would you even describe it? Modern, like, appropriate making good decisions death metal, like all the post-ulcerate stuff that's listened to by guys with real jobs and shit. And Ulcerate's a very good band, and probably one of the most important bands for death metal.
Yeah.
But sort of like we were talking about, Magla leads to all these bands that aren't really black metal. Ulcerate leads to all these bands that aren't really death metal.
Oh, for sure. And some of the melodic ideas in Ulcerate, when you really isolate them, as Ulcerate themselves have done more on their latest, which I need to spend more time with, but are kind of like Magla. This kind of open minor tonality, sort of glistening arpeggios. That's definitely just a thing on Ulcerate and Magla sides.
Well, I love, but what I love here is they're taking these kind of like Ulcerate inspired melodic passages, like just that sort of like shifting dyadic passage in the middle of that sample. That's totally an Ulcerate idea, and they're like, "Fuck you, we're taking it back for death metal." All right. Like, we're gonna use these parts that you developed, and we're gonna make actual death metal songs out of them.
No, I get that. The internal groove in it is so strong. I love how they use those sort of like I love when people do kind of like highly physical playing. You can hear that like neck slide, the sweep up, like down. Those kind of sweeps or like slides up the neck or something.
Yeah.
Those sound really cool. I can hear that being like that has definitely the kind of Ulcerate, weird wiggly time death metal thing, but it really works in the breakdown context too.
Yeah, no, I think these guys are like super seasoned musicians, and they take this break and they do these other bands, and then they're like, let's take all of what we learned in the intervening period, let's reinsert them into the Goratory form and see what happens.
What if this was the plan all along?
Was to take a 16-year hiatus and come back.
We must develop our skills, brothers.
We had to train in the mountains for a decade and a half and then come back to save our people.
They thought we had disbanded. We were training.
And I also like, honestly, a lot of this actually reminds me of the Sickening Horror record that we covered. But Sickening Horror, it's like we were saying, is like, a lot of that's just kind of like extreme techie thrash riffing. This is a fucking death metal record.
I found the Sickening Horror way more accessible. But I also get why this is way higher intensity.
Well, it's interesting because I think this is like way more accessible at first blush than like Induced or Insalubrity or any of those kind of like New Standard Elite type bands that we've covered on the show.
Oh, for sure. I just, I have my own kind of abominably inaccessible music, like the latest Diocletian record. And so when I hear Induced, I'm just like, ha 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 ha.
Yeah, this makes sense.
Smash, explode, right? And this is a very different kind of extremity. This is like, like trying to watch parts lighting up on a circuit board or something.
Yeah, it's just trying to like make sense of all the patterns that you're seeing.
Yeah, it's like, the notes, they're swarming.
So I'll get to my next sample. This is off the second single of the album called Evolutionary Wart, which I think is probably the best track on the album. And we're just going to listen to the opening.
Yeah, I would have picked this one if you didn't. This is great.
Yeah, this is a fucking outstanding song. So we'll listen to the opening minute and a half of this, and whoa, the fucking melodic ideas going on here. Holy shit. Let's go for it. Man, that's just like, you know, you've had all these like mannered tech death bands over the years that, you know, like kids on YouTube are really obsessed with. But honestly, I
believe you were going to name names.
Well, I mean, the obvious shit would be like Archspire or shit like that. You know, just, I mean, that's the most immediate one. I mean, there's been different ones over the years, Rings of Saturn, something like that, or even going back like Necrophagist. But I would say, like, just that clip there is more authentically classical music than almost any of those so-called neoclassical, like, prog death bands.
I for sure hear that, yeah.
And what this really reminds me of, because, you know, most of the prog death bands are just really into using, you know, Beethoven and Mozart phrases. This sounds more like Stravinsky to me. You know, it's fraught, and there's a lot of tension to the melodies amidst these very openly kind of beautiful melodic ideas.
You know, yeah, like in Stravinsky, there's sort of leaps between these kind of eerily beautiful melodies and just vicious pedal point, right? And, of course, the other really Stravinsky-influenced extreme music, the thing that sounds the most like The Rite of Spring, is Jane Doe by Converge.
Yeah.
So there's some sort of New England thing going on here.
There's a continuity, clearly.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, we usually don't dwell on this too much on the show. This album as a whole might have... I mean, probably does have the single, like, best technical performances that we've covered on the show this year. It's just completely off the fucking charts. You know,
I think that Cimetière fucking killed it.
In a different way, it did.
yeah, that's my kind of technology.
Well, that's my thing. Is like, you know, there originally in tech death there was a point to the virtuosity. You know, it was to a paint with a broader palette of ideas. It wasn't merely demonstrative.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And there is something to, you know, you spend these years listening to this music. Originally, you know, as a kid, I was really into tech death. Then I started learning about music. I got really into, like, hyper minimal stuff. And now as I get older, I'm starting to get more into technical music again. Sort of charting my development as a musician myself. And yeah, it's like, no, there is actually a sort of sublimity you can arrive at through truly outstanding technical performances, and this is damn near that.
Yeah, well, I would say Defeated Sanity, right? We heard
Defeated Sanity, yeah.
Defeated Sanity definitely is extraordinarily technical, and a little more to my taste in that regard, but also just extremely sublime and gorgeous in its wicked way.
Defeated Sanity might edge this out just because those guys are, like, insane people.
Yeah, exactly. That's almost like not even a comparison, right? There's sort of like, there's a soulfulness in their playing that is just not on the menu for most of these bands. But like, aside from that, this is definitely the most technical thing, and it does, in moments like this, it definitely does give some of that sort of majesty of technical death thing. Mm-hmm. And also, you know, as far as we're talking about death metal trying to preserve or return to what's specific to it via brutal death, you know, technicality was supposed to be part of the extremity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Death metal is supposed to be shamelessly maximalist.
Yeah.
And in black metal, because it's so oriented towards rigorous minimal songwriting, if you just max things out, it can produce short-term benefits, but people will eventually decide, oh, you're not doing anything new per se, or you're not pushing the envelope. You've just taken this thing and you're doing more of it.
Yeah.
Whereas in death metal, technical maximalism is a way to do something different. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like that. I think in death metal, sort of beefing up the tech component of it, as long as it's still at the service of songs and extremity, I think that counts as a legitimate innovation.
Yeah, well, and what this album does right, in contrast to a lot of these, like, mannered tech death bands about space and math, is that it's still...
Oh, God, I hate the math ones.
It's still about being incredibly fucking angry. Like, the lyrics on this album are vicious.
Dude, the lyrics to this track are, you know, the general theme is something like, civilization has blunted the edge of Darwinian processes.
Yeah.
And, which could be lyrics off a Forgotten Woods record or some shit, or a Marduk record, but here it's done in this vicious, satirical sort of immediacy of death metal. Mm-hmm. Like, let's see if I'm allowed to read any of these things. You know, like, diabetic shock, a shot of insulin, pus is leaking out your dick hole, here's some fucking penicillin, a call for court-appointed sterilization, forcible chemical castration, natural selection, nature wants you to die, but like the cockroaches you are, somehow you will find a way to survive.
I like just the isolated line a little bit later. The world wants you to kill yourselves.
Yeah.
And that's honestly the whole fucking album is just like intensely fucking vicious, and it's like it's got the satirical edge. So, and especially like with the cover art and thing, people will imagine this is like a joke record. No, the lyrics aren't jokes. They're fucking mean, and also just the. Like, even for instance, something dumb like the cover art, you know, it's funny, but it's also just, like, vicious in a way, you know? All of your grand imaginings of the world beyond and all your philosophy is channeled by staring at a scrotum growing from a set of grapes. You know?
Yeah, you listen to... You go do, you know, you listen to Joe Rogan and you go do ayahuasca and then you end up staring at the scrotum grapes. It's I mean, yeah, if there's a sentiment underlying this, which I think is a good sentiment, it's extremely anti-hippie. Specifically sort of anti-New Age Silicon Valley hallucinogen technocrat hippie.
Yeah.
Right? So they had that anti-Burning Man song. And then this track, The People's Temple, right? Which is, you know, everyone writes a fucking song about Jim Jones. But let's hear the lyrics they're about Heaven's Gate. They're talking about what a bastard Jim Jones is, but they're also mocking his victims as chumps.
Which is sick.
Yeah. So let's listen to the middle of this. This is just some cool, intense death metal.
All right, let's check it out.
Yeah, so am I even qualified to comment on the music there? I liked the sort of, I like the sort of forbidding triplet roll riff. I think we were both into that one.
Oh, yeah. But it's like, well, they do a lot of kind of like head fake things on this record. It's like you expect it to go into kind of a breakdown, but no, it goes into just this like very complex kind of choppy down-picked passage instead with these bursts of just like light speed palm muted tremolo. I like that a lot on this record. They're doing a lot of these just like hyper speed, palm muted tremolo riffs so you can really hear the physical attack and just how fast these fucking notes are being played. It's so mercilessly extreme. And I mean, I guess that's really kind of the focal point of this record is this is what what I was talking about. It's like, death metal, if he wants to be relevant and it wants to move forward, we need more guys doing the stuff where they're technically beating basically everyone else, but they're also being fucking assholes at the same time. Having your like incredibly like sociopathic lyrics and having, just your like scrotum adorned album covers and shit like that. That's all important, I think.
And the death metal, the sort of the real world quality of it, and the satirical quality, and the idea that you could sort of vividly sketch these little nasty vignettes, that gives it a totally different. It strikes in a different way from black metal, right?
Yeah,
and it's it sort of it hits home in a different way that's uniquely death metal, and it's kind of it's incisive music.
Yeah,
and I don't know. The bring back and also as you were saying, the technicality. I've said this on the show before, but Trey Azagthoth was like, I want other people to hear me and quit.
Yeah.
So this is like malevolent technicality.
Oh yeah, it's like that's the problem is, as there's this weird thing where, people get better become better musicians, and it's like, oh, it's time for the music to grow up. And what that usually means to these people is, oh, it's supposed to soften, and we're supposed to, write songs about being dads and shit. These guys got...
I've been listening to a lot of Pink Floyd and the Eagles, and I feel like it's really informed my new emphasis on sort of melody and development. Yeah,
Goratory, went away for 16 years and came back meaner than before.
Yes, that is so cool. That's so cool.
Which, again, we've talked about this on the show before. I've only gotten fucking meaner and weirder as I've gotten older.
Absolutely the same. Yeah.
I don't understand why so many of these guys are like softening up, becoming dads, getting real jobs and shit. Disgusting.
Yeah. So on that note, there's what do you make of? I can't read the lyrics to this song, but what do you make of Seth Putnam was a sensitive man? I will just say the lyrics to this mostly involve the idea of Seth Putnam being subjected to non-consensual anal penetration in hell. He's one of your heroes. Do you take this as a pro or anti-Seth statement?
Oh, I think it's an anti-Seth statement, but it's coming from like what I imagine is kind of like deep cut scene drama in like New England. So it's like, I think, Seth Putnam is like a personal hero of mine in the same way like G.G. Allen is, but I absolutely understand that if I lived up there and I had to deal with him, I would probably fucking hate him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure, dealing with G.G. Allen, right? It would be like...
Oh, yeah. It's super cool in the abstract, and I respect what they did, but I imagine, like, being physically in his presence was probably just obnoxious and horrible most of the time.
Here, I can read this one. Persona like a mutant, but we know you, dude. You're from fucking Newton. You used to sell porno mags to kids in Natick.
Like, this is all got to be, like, deep cut, like, scene infighting in New England. So it's very funny to read as an outsider and just being like, oh, what the fuck are the origin of all these different stories? But it's also funny because they clearly know a lot about anal cunt because there's so many twists on song titles. There's like fucking 15 song title flips. On Seth
in some sense, isn't the best way to pay tribute to Seth Putnam telling him to get non-consensually penetrated in hell?
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like, even if you want it to be mean to his memory, it's like, I mean, doesn't that really just play right into his trap? You know what I mean?
It's but yeah, so I guess you love this. I can't honestly say I love it just because it's so not my kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I get that.
But I don't understand him, but I respect the hell out of him.
That's totally fair. All right, that's a good note to end on. Let's take a quick break, get to another record.
How's it going? Connor here from Oncology, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, so next up we've got Yersin with Guilt, and I know Rob on guitar reached out to you. Were you familiar with these guys at all before that?
Not remotely, man. I think he's, they've got this is their first full length coming out. They've released a number of demos and EPs, so he just got in touch. Again, I sort of checked it out because if someone contacts me and says check out their stuff, I'll check it out. Before I'd heard anything, I did the quick thing like, well, it's Instagram, so let me Insta-stalk this guy. So I just did a quick scroll through, and it was like, well, it seems like kind of a grind band, but this guy's really into, real black metal, two-handed swords, and motorcycles. And then I was like, okay, seems like my kind of guy. So I think what's cool about this band is that they incorporate black metal and death metal, which is more expected and stuff, into the grind formula, and in a way that's pretty different from the kind of superficially, quote, blackened stuff that was really popular with like Cult Nation bands back in the day, where it's just like, hey, it's grindcore, but like there's a Dark Throne riff, and like, and it's like, isn't that just grindcore?
Exactly. Yeah, a Celtic Frost riff appearing in grindcore. That's never happened.
Yeah,
that didn't happen. That didn't happen 20 times on Scum.
Wait, sir. There's. Pardon me, sir. There's a grindcore riff in my Dark Throne song. So the impression I get overall is that this is a band that's been trying to push in a more kind of metal direction.
Yeah.
I like this a lot better than the stuff that they had before. And what stands out about the Black and Death influences is that, again, it's not like Dark Throne. There's this kind of swaggering, ballsy, flamboyant melodicism to it.
Yeah, it's got an asshole quality, which is always good. I think that's, like we said with the Goratory, that's important for a metal band. You should be kind of an asshole.
Completely agreed, yeah. And that doesn't mean you can't be, like, nice to people in real life, but when you're making metal, you should be an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting the way you read this, because I think that the way I read this music is very different from you. Or maybe not so much, but you see, I read this as very contiguous with a style that has gained prominence over the past 5 or 10 years, and I don't know what you would call it, but something analogous to Code Orange or Nails with a prominent black metal influence. I mean, what do we call bands like that? These sort of like bigger, they're kind of crust, they're kind of hardcore, they're kind of metal, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah. So first off, for our listeners, that's an important thing, and you really called my attention to this, but as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. It's like, grind holds these songs together more as an idea Like, and a very, like, just we can throw all sorts of different elements in relatively short songs than as, like, a genre, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't even, Basement Torture Killings had a very eclectic sound, but the point was it had that and it grinded really hard through all these different, like, melodic influences. Most parts of this you couldn't describe as grinding, even.
Yeah, no, I don't get the sense that... I'm sure that they...
So I hear what you mean.
Yeah.
Code Orange I don't associate with crust. Nails more so. But yeah, kind of like beatdown, hardcore, blast beat based stuff,
I guess Terminal Nation would be a good thing to associate.
Yeah, we were I remember we were talking about Nails before. Yeah, Terminal Nation kind of Nails, a take on the Nails idea.
Yeah. So let's start with a sample so we can get our feet under us as far as what this sounds like on the basic.
Yeah, our listeners are probably having a hard time imagining it.
Yeah. So let's what have you got for us to start?
Well, so the parts that strike me most about this are the effective black metal parts. Here's pretty much the beginning of the record, and this is the first track, Guilt. Let's hear it.
All right, let's try it out.
Opening your album by doing a sort of homage to At the Heart of Winter. That's a ballsy move. So, right, there's a lot of Immortal all over this.
A lot of late Immortal in particular.
Exactly, which is a underrated among black metal people. And if you're trying to bring black metal into a more kind of beefy, high production, catchy genre, like this kind of modern hardcore stuff, good choice.
Yeah.
And even the 6/8 stuff there sounds like a stripped down version of something like Tragedies Blows at the Horizon or whatever. So the sort of, and it sounds cold also, which I think does a nice job of channeling the Sunderland thing and relates to the asshole quality of it. But, what were you hearing there?
Well, what I was hearing, what kind of surprised me is I think that a lot of the melodic ideas on this record trade in a lot of the kind of like arena crust or doom crust tropes that you usually dislike. You know, there's stuff on this record that I could directly compare to. This isn't a band that you dislike, but they're representative of the style, like Stormcrow or something like that.
I'm kind of meh about Stormcrow, yeah.
Yeah, no, I like Stormcrow a lot, but yeah, no, so So what makes this different? Because I think this is very closely tied to a lot of stuff that you usually dislike in the crust scene. Now, obviously, this isn't a crust record, but it's clearly informed by a lot of those
Interesting.
ideas.
When I listened to this, I didn't think of crust at all.
That's
because of the sort of the polished hardcore quality to it. It could be a case of So my get out of jail free attempt with your question is that it could be a parallel evolution thing. It's just like if you take kind of a beat, a punchy beatdown sound, and you mix it with a lot of Immortal, then you'll get maybe kind of very simple sounding epic chug sections, which, like in 6/8 or something, which might sound like Stormcrow. I don't doubt that these guys listen to some crust, What makes it different? I mean, I think with a lot of that stuff, what do I want to say? Like,
well,
I can't speak specifically to Stormcrow. It's been a long time, but with something like, say, I would say Dysphere good, not very deep, but good.
Okay.
Dysphere good, Wolf Brigade bad.
I was actually going to specifically say, let's narrow it down. I mean, this could, in a sense, be Dysphere plus Immortal, modernized.
Yeah, and so then the answer is I do like Dysphere. Do you remember when we did that crust segment on that band Life, and we listened to In the Shadow of the Horns for the first time in years?
But is Dysphere crust? I guess that's the question,
Well, that's why we have the label Arena Crust, right? It's Dysphere is not, when they once they get to that standard, once they get to Live the Storm, it's kind of divorced from a meaningfully crusty sound and ethos.
We've had this discussion about crust being an aesthetic that's overlaid onto things now, and I think that's more what I mean.
People started using it to people started using it to describe anything with D beats or something. People started describing Converge as sounding crusty.
That's completely fucking incorrect.
That's
outstandingly wrong. I don't know where to begin.
Indeed. It's has Converge heard Discharge? Yes, I'm sure. So this sounds something like, I get what you mean about the Dysphere thing. Big, beefy, epic, fun kind of hardcore-ish extreme music. I get that completely.
Oh, I think
on Dysphere meets Immortal, I'll just be like, cool, sounds good to me, bro.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that as a bad thing, because that sounds very cool to me, because I like more of the Arena crust than you do, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got another reference point, which I'll get to on my next sample, that I think actually confirms what you're saying.
Okay, well, let's just get right into that next sample. What have you got?
All right. So this is, again, one of the more black metal places on the record, and I think my guess is that this record was written probably you could probably hear the band's development on the record. So on the front end, there's more black metal-y stuff. I hope it keeps moving in this direction. This track is Northern Stronghold, which is a fucking banger. Definitely not a grind song remotely. So maybe we're just wrong to impose that on the band at all. And basically, this sample follows on a very kind of chug and gang vocal chant based track, and this is like the big peak moment.
All right, let's try it out. It's the samples that you're choosing are really fascinating to me, just because I feel like I've encountered similar ideas in other bands, and you've really disliked it there. I don't want to like dwell on like the crust topic or something too much, but it's very interesting because you're actually choosing these like just like kind of big fun parts that I wouldn't usually expect from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. So, I mean, maybe there's a bias thing. Maybe it's just like, hey, this guy who seems chill contacted us, and so I like it.
Oh, no, we're huge assholes. We could tell him if it sucked, which this album doesn't. This is a pretty good fucking record, but...
Yeah, so, I mean, so I guess, so we've known each other forever. There was a bunch of stuff that kind of had this superficially blackened thing, or this kind of arena crust thing back in around 2010 when we were first in contact that I pissed on all the time. Some of that I was right to piss on, or I think a lot of it, but like some of that also comes from knee-jerk reflexes, right?
Yeah.
So you hear something that sounds polished and has a crunchy mid-range production and has some black metal-y elements in it, and back in 2010 when I have like, defend cult honor, right? Kind of just like, instinctively like, fuck this. Also because you're like in your early 20s and that's how you should be, right? You should be sort of reactive and angry. So in some sense, maybe you're right that if I'd heard this back then, I wouldn't have liked it. I think I've gotten better at like trying to meet things where they're at.
Yeah, that's fair.
But also, like, as you say, I do think Dysphere is really good. And more than that, and that first sort of ripping, sped up D beat part, right? Which is not really crust, right? That's very consistent with trend of sort of like beefy crust influenced hardcore.
I mean, shit, is it post crust? Is that a thing?
That that would be a fine term for it, right? Or just like crust influenced metalcore, right? But that ripping D beat part reminded me of like All Pigs Must Die, who I loved, right? At least the first
what
EP.
a forgotten fucking band.
Yeah, very forgotten band. Members of Hope Conspiracy. The sad thing was that
I guess they're still active. Holy shit! I had no idea they were still together.
They were one of those bands that I think this happens. They were one of those bands that I think because of the media, in part, misunderstood what their talents were. So sludge was really big back then, and so people were like, they have these big sludgy parts. But the first EP was just all killer, no filler, back to front, ripping metalcore, like with this kind of crust thing. So this reminds me a bit of the things in that genre that I like, and especially what this reminds me of is Kvelertak.
Which is a very interesting point of comparison. Kind of elaborate on that for me.
So Kvelertak, for those who don't remember, they're this like Norse dudes from the hardcore scene who you could tell really listened to a lot of black metal and started writing this very cold triumphant sounding party bro hardcore, like with lots of rock and roll in it.
Yeah, they did. How the fuck would I describe Kvelertak? It also has like a weird like subdued stoner quality to it. It's
for sure.
It's
like
very
they
strange.
listen to Kaios for sure. Yeah.
They listen to Kaios and Kylisa as well as Immortal, and maybe they're drawing from the same places as like High on Fire is drawing.
No, for sure. I think it is it's a meeting between like very early 2000s cool guy kind of sludgy hardcore and like black metal.
And it's happy. Remember that it's mostly very happy.
It's extremely upbeat. Yeah, it's great live band. So this sounds like a track like this sounds like a more asshole version of Kvelertak.
Okay,
like,
I kind of get
got
where
that
you're coming from.
Swaggering. There's a specific Kvelertak track I can remember that works like this. You take an Immortal chords and you make this swaggering halftime hardcore thing out of it, and you do a chant over it. And that's cool. I think This Is the Northern Stronghold is a great chant, especially if you're from Northern England. If there's anything weird about this sample, it's just that chant at the end is sick too. That's something like "Obey me, for I am the Lord. Those who don't die by the sword."
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Also a great chant, but like not sure the need to go back to that verse part once you're at the end of the song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it.
It's yeah.
So I think I'll open up and be like, this is definitely a case of like, this is a record where I think it's good, I respect it, totally not to my taste kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of outside both our wheelhouses.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Probably like further outside mine. But I do think this is a band that will blow up. I think this is going to appeal to a shit ton of people. And not in the sense that it's like, oh, you know, it's fucking mainstream or it's dumbed down or something. No, it's good music. But it's tapping into, I think, modern threads of what's happening in this sort of space of these, like, modern, I don't know, like, meta hardcore bands, you know? Like, you know, I mean, hardcore is splintered in so many directions with so many kind of fusion styles. Okay, you aggregate it back to the center, you know, you kind of recombine everything, and then you figure out where you're going from there. So, I'll be a little critical with my first sample, and then I'll get into something that I really enjoy. But let's listen to the opening minute and a half off of Insidious Mechanized Barrymore, and I just imagine...
That's a grind song title.
I imagine a mechanized Drew Barrymore, which is probably not the idea, but I thought it was very funny. So,
that might be it, man. A mechanized Drew Barrymore waifu.
That would be pretty sick. All right, so let's try that out.
That's this is the dystopian future everyone wants. So.
Okay, let's give it a try. So that is, insofar as you can call this a grind album, some of the better straightforward kind of grindy stuff. I really like, we were talking while I was playing, and I said, I think he's playing on an 8-string, and apparently he is, right?
Yeah, so the lineup, there's a vocalist, a drummer, and just the guitarist at this point. So he's filling in all that sound. And I said, bro, you got a great tone. And then he said a bunch of things I didn't understand, so I'm going to read them to you. We use a EVH 5150 through a Mode 4 stack and a 500-watt bass head into a 8x10 with an octave down and metal zone at the same time. Also an 8-string helps.
Oh, okay. So
I understand some of that. So I think what he means is it's really loud.
I think he's splitting the signal basically. So he's got the 8-string, and then he's playing through the 5150 for the main tone, but then he has a signal split out to an octaver to basically make it a simulated bass that's running out of a bass cab. I think that's the general idea of what's going on. So I really like the crunchy tone. I think aesthetically this album's on point. This is really good production. It's not my kind of production, but I acknowledge that everyone would love this.
You know what it is? It's a do your own God City. You know, it's the Kurt Ballou sound, but done by somebody not done by Kurt Ballou, so it's actually better. because it's not or it's better to do at this stage because that is such a standardized thing at this point.
Yeah, I get you. Well, I think so I guess if there's like the negative point that I have for this record, which I will say is totally my own. It's probably not a negative point to most other people, but I feel like these guys are probably like hyper talented musicians, and they're playing so within their own limits on this record. It gives it this kind of like uncanny feel. Like it feels like they could be these guys are operating at like 60%. You know, they could go so much faster and do stuff so much more extreme. And it's like, just for kind of the aesthetic they're cultivating, this kind of like workman-like, pseudo-crusty kind of tone, I almost wish it was a little more unhinged, you know? Like
yeah, I kind of agree. Some of the D-beat parts feel... I mean, even the fast part before that I kind of liked. Mm-hmm. There could be better note choice in the D-beat parts, and better note choice could be make it more extreme. It could be more going on in the riffing.
There could be more going on in the riffing, but even just beyond that, maybe if they just played it faster. Make it so it's like a little bit harder to keep up than...
Yeah. It's too close to regularly paced fast D-beat.
Yeah, they're too good at their instruments. They need to,
and that's the arena crust thing. Settling into lumbering pocket grooves.
Yeah,
and one reason I like it better than a lot of that stuff is because they're pushing the tempo. But if you want to hear a band push the tempo on that stuff while putting an insane amount of detail in the riffs, All Pigs Must Die, first EP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, another thing. Here's a comparison that you'll hate. One thing that this actually struck me as is. Reminds me a little bit of Young and in the Way.
Oh, God, I do hate that comparison.
I know that you do.
I don't know but I barely know how they sound. Who knows what this band thinks of Young and in the Way? But I thought Young and in the Way was mostly like mid-tempo.
Yeah, they do more mid-tempo stuff, but it's part of that whole wave of kind of like black crust that is not very black and also not very crust. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely in the definitely in the... Does Young and in the Way have, like, sick Immortal riffs?
I don't think they have sick Immortal riffs. They've got, like... Yes. They've got arena Dark Throne riffs, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. I hate that shit. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's... so this is where I get to, that kind of idea of, grinding stuff. It's like, this is clearly cut from a sort of idea of grind. Mm-hmm. But this doesn't hit the same way,
It doesn't grind.
Yeah, it's a little too mannered, it's a little too restrained, or even stuff like the vocal performance. It's a good vocal performance, but me personally, I wish it was kind of more screechy and crazy and weird, Yeah,
there's I think these guys like a lot of punk rock. Mm-hmm. And the vocals have a very punk rock quality, which I think in certain places, like the chants, I think is good. But if you're just going really fast, more screechy or growly would be good.
Yeah, no, I think this is a weird situation where all of my recommendations for the band should not be heeded, because all it's going to do is make you less accessible and probably less enjoyable to most people. I've just got my own kind of weird hang-ups. But let me get to another sample of something that I really like, which comes out more on the back half, which is the sort of beatdown hardcore stuff that they do. And I really like these tracks. So let's check out Fritzl, obviously, after Joseph Fritzl, the Austrian who kept his daughter in a sort of dungeon for 20 years or something.
Lovely.
Oh, you don't know that one?
I think I probably heard about it.
Yeah, Joseph Fritzl. Cerebral Bore did a great song about it called 20-Year Party Dungeon. All right, so let's listen to this little passage off Fritzl.
All right, well, this is a good time to say we will never make any money off of monetization or ads. So if you like what we're doing, subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, let's go. Yeah, so that's basically just like Knocked Loose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the guitar tone on here is much closer to a band like Knocked Loose than to Grind, right? It's kind of got this, like, it's got this kind of, like, the good aspects of gent quality to it. Do you know what I mean? Knocked Loose definitely has that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's got this kind of bendy, kind of heavily, inorganic in a good way quality.
It's like you take an HM2 and you suck all the warmth out of it, you know? So there's actually a fair few parts on this record where they're doing, like, just kind of straight up beatdown parts. Like, I'm not going to play a clip, but I think it's off, I want to say Massive Head Wound, like the second track, where it's got this giant, just like almost deathcore breakdown. Like, just like open note deathcore breakdown. And it's really interesting hearing these much more, like, sort of conventionally, like, ignorant tough guy hardcore things presented through this aesthetic, this sort of, like, kind of crust-ish black metal grindy aesthetic. I think it's really interesting, and I think that's something to expand on for this band. Because, like, that section of Fritzl is like, oh yeah, I definitely, want to deck someone in a pit to that, but it's different. I don't know, when I listen to Alcest, I guess. Although Alcest live is surprisingly pit-worthy. Like,
oh god,
they're a very different band live.
Here we go, yep. Mm-hmm.
Hey, fuck off, they're amazing live, because they got this bulldozer Godflesh bass tone, which totally changes the way the songs feel. Anyway, so I think the niche for this band, I wrote it in the notes because I think it's great phrases. Code Orange for people who can drink more than 2 beers without passing out. Because seriously, because they've got this, like, kind of, like, modern, it's all a morass, of ideas these days, but this sort of modern hardcore...
it is very pastiche songwriting,
Yeah. So they got this modern hardcore idea, and their bridging thing, the thing that makes them distinct, is the sort of black metal aesthetic and some of the kind of intensely second wave riffs they're doing. But so how do you expand on those in parallel? Well, you keep the second wave stuff, and you keep the really, like, beatdowny stuff, and you drive forward with those 2 prongs kind of guiding it,
And this is the moment where everyone who's listened to the show realizes they could have written this review before we did. Oh, it turns out they want it to sound more like black metal and beatdown. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I completely agree. There's like, there's maybe like 4 or 5 different discrete riffing styles here. There's black metal, there's some melodeath stuff, which sounds kind of like Darkest Hour. And can fit with the black metal stuff if you want it, but it's sort of different.
I mean, if you're doing, like, late Immortal, I mean, it basically works with it.
It basically fits. Yeah, I think I like that combination. Late Immortal and kind of at the gatesy stuff, but, like, intense at the gates. That's good. But, and then, like, the kind of crust parts, which are, in the arena crust way, invariably kind of phoned in. You'd have to put in work on those to make them pop more, and then it'd be a different band.
Yeah.
And then, basically, your beatdown parts. I agree, yeah, they should... I think the parts that sound like... The DBD parts are kind of the weak link here.
Yeah, I think that the sort of, whether you want to call it crust or not, the crust-isms are kind of like they're a connective tissue on this album.
Yes, yeah. It's a fallback.
Yeah, it feels like kind of a resting position for the band. It's a place they're all comfortable with, but playing this kind of music is not about being comfortable. It's not about making the easy choice.
Oh, yeah. No, you've got to be, like, straining and pushing. If anything, maybe, I mean, yeah, I think if you could distill to the hardcore and the beat, or to the black metal and the beatdown, then that might naturally help the black metal parts grind more. Imagine if you could play those immortally riffs in ways that are a little more battering, have the drums a little more just brutally up front, have more wildness and physicality in the guitar, right? And you hear some of that on Guilt, I think, on the first track.
Yeah, no, I think that's a
if you
big
could
thing.
make grinding Immortal with kind of like screechy or tough guy vocals dropping into big fucking beatdown parts that still have some black metal to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that'd be a band we'd love.
Maybe all that we need to do, or not we, but this band needs to do is make the fast parts 20% faster and the slow parts 20% slower. Just like really go for like the furthest edges of the sound that they're already engaged in, you know, and like kind of shuck away some of the more palatable stuff in the middle, and you'll get something really extreme and cool, I think.
Yes, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And you know, like, and try to, you know what the D beat is doing, or the crust-ish parts are doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Is they're sort of bridging the gap. They're like a sort of common denominator that bridges from the black metal tonalities to the beatdown tonalities.
I think aggressively shifting from the black metal to the beatdown might be a cool technique.
It could be. You'd have to think about it. It could be, because it could be like the modern hardcore version of the In the Night Side Eclipse effect.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is these just sort of rapid shifts between emotional registers. You could do that. You could find ways to write the beatdowns with a little bit more texture to them, or just like maybe a little less bluesy intervals, a little more minor intervals.
Yeah.
Maybe just that. But I agree. Yeah, faster and slower. And you know, the thing is, like, you don't get pop. I mean, at this point, there are a lot of other bands who are already popular for doing that kind of pocket groove arena crust stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, way too many. You don't get popular. This band does have potential to be popular, but there's no reason that should be inconsistent with making it more extreme, because ultimately you don't break in unless you're taking risks and being cool.
Definitely. So
Yeah.
I think overall, you know, I think this is a good album, and I'm interested to see, because, you know, from what you're suggesting, this seems like this is kind of a transitional piece, even though it's their first full length. But I'm interested to see where they go. I'd also like to see a live video of these guys.
I think they'd be really fun live.
I think they'd be really excellent live.
I just hope I'm not sure we'd remember the show.
Well, that's how every good show goes. So.
Indeed.
So what do we want for an interlude track? I mean, I've got an idea.
I think it's up to you, bro, because I got both of them last time.
Oh, shit, let's just let's see if this is still palatable to you. You were saying you didn't like it back in the day, but let's do Stormcrow.
All right.
Since we're talking about big like doom crust stuff, we'll listen to Stormcrow's Dead Dreams, easily my favorite song by those guys, and we'll be back with the back half of our episode. right, and we are back after investigating our Doom Crust priors with more Slav Black. They came from Visions with Cloak of Darkness, Dagger of Night, and like I said up front, this was a last minute replacement because the other record I was going to cover was delayed by a week, and honestly, I'm pretty happy that I found this one because it's a really good pairing with the Dressed in Streams record we're going to cover as the last record of the night. So, I mean, what's the idea here? I mean, this really continues kind of the thread we were talking about with Toad Eater, doesn't it?
Yes. So, for those who haven't heard that episode, if you want to be a completist, stop now. Go back to episode 23 and listen to Toad Eater, where we have a kind of knockdown, drag-out argument about Migla and about whether and how black metal needs to respond to the influence of Migla and post-black. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, basically. Mm-hmm. And it was totally coincidental that I stumbled across this, which is kind of an example of like a real Slavic black metal band kind of recombining a lot of these kind of post-black ideas into the fold, as well as Migla ideas, but not forgetting the roots of Slavic black metal, which are very folky and kind of ambient in ways. And I think it makes for something that we can probably both agree on is like a good path for this sort of thing to take, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in some sense, this is staking out... if you were just to block it out in terms of genres, this is staking out exactly the same territory as something like Toad Eater.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of... where Toad Eater was on the post-hardcore to Slav Black pipeline, as you say, this is Slav Black sort of consciously engaging with the post influences that had already crept in via Druid and other stuff. But yeah, I think this is a good path. I think this is a much more authentic take on that sound, and it keeps that kind of... well, you say this in your notes here, and I completely agree. It keeps the sort of depth in the chording, you know?
Yeah.
The depth in the chording, which has these resonances of folk, that characterizes Slav Black. And this band in particular contributes a lot of unique kind of rhythmic and melodic ideas of their own, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think this is a record I'll have to revisit a couple more times to like fully get. And it's not a perfect record. I think there are missteps here and there. I think they're figuring out exactly how they want to combine all these influences. And I think there's kind of it's a 5-track full length, and they're kind of taking like a slightly different angle on it, on every track.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
It mostly sticks. There's like a track and a half where I think it really doesn't stick. But overall, it's a really admirable way to update Slav Black, and kind of like we were talking about Goratory stealing these kind of ulcerate ideas back for death metal. Let's steal these post-black ideas back for actual black metal and evolve from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very nice characterization. I agree. This might be one of those where we basically have the same take on it. It's there are, I think, just I can say up front, there are some weak parts on this, which is to be expected with somebody trying to do something kind of new. I think, a few parts kind of drag, basically, is the weakness of it. And I think it's where they feel like this kind of winding our way through the sad little French melody. Right? And which led me to a thought about, like, okay, if we're going to, in sort of, let's say, real black metal, respond to the post-black scene, respond to the outrageous influence Migla has had in sort of parallel universe black metal, how do we do that? Well, one path forward is more Slav, less France.
Yeah, that seems fair.
France has their own post-black sound, and I think they're at their best where, like, the good French post-black is hardcore.
Yeah.
You know, or like Celeste, like heavily hardcore influenced, or is just the bands that people think of as French black metal bands, like Aosoth has a ton of hardcore in it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say B. You know, where are these guys from? Are they Polish?
These guys are from...
No, sorry, they're from Kiev. Yeah,
they're from Kiev. So, I mean, that's part of the reason they sound more authentically Slav, because they're Slavs. So.
Yes, they are Slavs. They are Slavs, and they should not do the thing that you can hear happen in some Slav black, including on some of the later Drudge stuff, where they start imitating Frenchmen. I don't think you want to go down that path.
No, definitely not. Like, the chording style of these melodies has a lot more to do with, like, Roman Sanko.
Yeah. I don't know why I said Poland for a minute. I brain farted. This band is obviously Ukrainian when you listen to it. Yeah. Very Sanko. Yeah.
And I'm definitely not a huge Sanko fan, but they're definitely taking the best ideas from Blood in Our Wills and trying to combine that with post-black, probably in a better way than later Drudge does. So.
There are some places, I thought the last Drudge, They Often See Dreams About the Spring, was pretty good. I think the new, The Windswept, I really like. There are melodies on this that remind me a bit of Windswept, his other project, but I agree, there are definitely some, more than a few missteps in the last decade of Drudge stuff, right?
All right, so we've actually both got samples off one of these songs, but let's go with your opening one.
So this one is Cloak of Darkness, and just gonna start in about 30 seconds in once it kind of coalesces out of the darkness.
All right, let's give it a shot. So yeah, that's a pretty good fusion of Mgla and Drudge right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to like talk about the note choice between that kind of open minor arpeggios and then these kind of more dense, jangly folk chords, there it is. Right?
Yeah, I really appreciate the kind of like a twanging slide stuff that happens at the end there. You know, really bringing the folk black to black metal, to Slav black in particular.
Yeah, for sure. I like that a lot. I think it reminds me of they peel back the distortion and stuff, and it draws attention to the actual chords and to how they're picking.
Mm-hmm.
They pick in a kind of eccentric way. Maybe not so much in this, but all over. There's a lot of like weird pickup notes. There's a lot of kind of little bendy things.
Yeah, just these little adornments that help to accentuate. Some of the riffs on this would be kind of like stock Slav black riffs, but those little accentuating bits gives them more personality. There's the whole vibe of this record is much more intensely kind of peasant folk than a lot of stuff, I think. It doesn't have the it's not like Blazebirth Hall where it's all about kind of like the vastness of the Russo-Ukrainian landscape or something.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. Yeah.
This is music about chopping wood, and it's cold.
Yeah, the best parts of Blood Narwhals are about riding down someone on foot from a horse. This is definitely those are like Cossack music. This is chopping wood for sure, and like playing your little playing your lutes and whatever. Right?
This is the kind of black metal album that Old Mill would be into.
That's definitely true. Maybe if they need a U.S. tape run, seems like a very new band. If they need not a U.S. a North American tape run, maybe. But yeah, it feels very folky. I mean, what I loved about this particular part was, the opening melody was interesting. It had this, it was kind of stretched out in a good way. Good sort of timing. They use timing to change up the melodies a lot. But then that slowdown, it's the sort of, it goes to almost this breakdown thing at halftime. So you get a double bass roll under these chiming kind of Drudky chords, and then they throw in that low-end trem riff. Really, there are a lot of cool, really hollow-sounding single-string death metal trem riffs on this. That kind of, you'll get some on your sample. They kind of they fit because they kind of connect to things in Hate Forest, but it's pretty unique.
I think there's a distinct Hate Forest quality to a lot of the stuff, which is interesting because, now I'm discovering all these bands where it's like, I'm not really into Hate Forest, but I'm really appreciating all these bands that are deriving a lot of their ideas from them.
No, I like that you've been picking, I've kind of been showing you more Senko-y stuff on the show, and I think you've immediately picked up on how his style works more and how it percolates into this other stuff.
And I think I'm going to get into that on my my sample off this same track, because I think the intrinsic thing about Senko, which is a good or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for in a band, is his interest in, at least in earlier Drudk and his side projects, not so much modern Drudk, having these gnarlier, more definitively kind of like dark and aggressive shapes to provide contrast to, it's like we were talking about, I was hanging out, last night.
Last night,
Yeah, I decided to throw on Microcosmos by Drudk, and I was like, Jesus, this is completely sugary. This does not have the sort of internal tension of old Drudk. But this band is really into that. So let's go a little bit further into...
Yeah, we're talking about how, people say they're influenced by Drudk, and what they probably mean is, they think they mean they're influenced by Autumn Aurora, but what they actually mean is they're influenced by Microcosmos and stuff after that.
Exactly. So let's go a little bit later in Cloak of Darkness, and we'll kind of run it to the end of the track, and that'll get into some stuff that I want to talk about. So that's an outstanding riff.
Yeah, that is very storming.
Oh yeah, right. That's where you and me really come together, because it's got the that glossy polished quality, but it's still it's darker and more conflicted than most of these kinds of bands would do these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The melody's sort of that's those sort of sliding top couple string riffs, Hate Forest riffs, and you can use them to make things that have. There's a nice melodic fit to them, but they still have these very kind of close, grim harmonies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I forget, we were saying this about like we were talking about Moldrion. It's like nature isn't all the foxes and the mice laying down together in the fields. Mm-hmm. It's kind of dangerous and spooky in a lot of ways. And
I really liked the lead up to this section too, because I mean you got a bit of it in the build mm-hmm. here, but like there's also just they were doing a 1-2 drum beat for a minute, and there's this kind of like just rolling, open, maybe just open D or whatever, open D kind of like single string trem, and it's very Hate Forest, but it's like, oh, this is the part of Hate Forest that was a death metal band.
Yeah. Like we always talk about, Hate Forest doing that fucking Bolt Thrower cover. It's an important thing to the band. Mm-hmm. And also, but there's also like that whole last section is where you can kind of see the post-black leak through, because that it's got that sort of metalcore structure that a lot of, I mean, the way that Climax is presented has the metalcore-isms of post-black metal, but it's purely structural. You mean the
rolling double bass stuff?
Yeah, and just like the way it arcs into this big kind of open, like, demonstrative, this is the climax passage. Mm-hmm. That's something like BBH would never do.
Right.
But, yeah, so so they use that structure, but then melodically it is totally Slavic and traditional in that way. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, these are... Probably a lot of people listen think this is splitting hairs, but no, that has a profound effect on the way that a song and an album comes across. I think this channels early Drudk better than most of its imitators.
I agree. So that's the thing I was going to say, man. It's like, I think this is the thing I've realized for years. This is a thing I said to you last night when we were talking about it. It's like, in reference to this particular record, and to the gloosh that I played at the end of the last show.
Yeah.
It's like, finally, after 15 years, people start paying attention to the actual notes Roman Sanko was playing.
Versus the general vibe.
The general tone, like, oh, black metal can be pretty.
Yeah.
Oh, black metal can have these sort of, like, long kind of chord parts. It's like, what makes it good is the notes.
No one wants to sit down on the guitar and grind it out for 6 hours to find something that actually... is profound.
Yeah, what made, and his, he has an ear, it's like, how do you bring he really has an ear for folk song and classical music, and he really brings that into the guitar style in a way that accommodates it to metal. And, that's a gift for metal guitarists, and you can either, like, draw from that, or you can just listen to the guitar tone. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Even the guitar tone people didn't get. Like, if you go back and listen to like what's the first Forgotten Legends?
Yeah.
Forgotten Legends bites your ears.
Forgotten Legends is very different from most Drudk.
It's true, but the chords are similar. It's just got this kind of buzzing, angry tone.
Well, yeah, it's kind of I always thought of that as like a sort of a weird dyad with the Swan Road.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love the Swan Road. That's my favorite Drudk record. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Anyway, so we should go to another sample, I guess.
Yeah, I think you've actually got the next one. It's a...
if we're going through in order, for sure. Yeah, we can finish on yours. That's good.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's go for this one.
So this is on second to last track, Terra Ultrix. If this kind of hardcore influenced Slav black is going to be like the new paradigm, as you were suggesting, then it has to start sort of gravitationally drawing other styles to it.
Yeah.
And incorporating other innovations. Well, here they're doing it very well. So.
All right, let's try it out. Ah, man, that
fucking monstrous Satanic War Master riff.
Oh my god, that final riff is so sick. But it's it's a monstrous Satanic War Master riff, but it's still like the implication of it is so different because of the surrounding textures. So like, yeah, it's like Satanic War Master does that riff, and it's like, I am a powerful werewolf overlord, and I just drank someone's blood, and it feels cool. Which is great. That's great. This, surrounded by the rest of the context of the music, was the harvest was unusually good this year. I can have 2 ears of corn at the festival. You know? Like,
yeah.
Which is, not to sound backhanded, is a fucking sick idea. You know, just like peasant triumph and despair.
Oh, absolutely. Have you ever seen pictures of like Ukrainian weddings?
Yeah, and it's
one of my buddies growing up was in Ukrainian scouting, which is pretty cool. And he would do this very traditional stuff. Yeah, you'd jump over a flame or something with them, or it's like it's one of those peasant pre-wedding rituals or something. It's like sweethearts do.
Very pagan.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's glorious. And also the pacing makes it more Slavic. It drops to that halftime.
It's that stately, processionary thing.
Stately. And what sets it up, the riff that sets it up, was just I was saying to the death metal guy while I played it, they completely commit to this riff that has this very Sanko chording, but specifically it's got these nice little pickup notes. And there are a lot of Finnish bands that use pickups in that way. You hear it more in the beginning of the song, but also really sounds like Primordial.
Yeah, and that's something you've got more experience with than I do.
Yeah, so Primordial, right, they're kind of a weird band because they get that there's a real way of using this Druid Hate Forest stuff in a kind of Graveland, lots of Graveland and Primordial.
Yeah.
They get like, this is kind of primordial ancient folk warrior music, and we could do that with Irish stuff and emphasize the pentatonics of it. And there are really good ideas in Primordial, but because of the semi-clean vocal thing, they've always kind of had, sometimes it really works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think because they became so popular, right? People started to think of them as a folk metal band or something. But
yeah, and I mean they kind of leaned into that themselves.
They did. They wrote some really poppy stuff, and they wrote some kind of clunky doom sounding stuff. But on like the Gathering Wilderness, and actually again on the last record in kind of a punchier way, they really just are like a brooding, grim folk black metal band. And this picks up on that. I think it's the first time I've heard an underground black metal band that sounds influenced by Primordial.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, I get that. I mean, yeah. Primordial is it's such a weird reference point just because it's one of those bands that it's like it got too big and sort of like exited our sphere of interest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of got absorbed into metal press, alternative culture, parallel universe. But I think at this point, Primordial has kind of abandoned that universe in turn.
No, I'll definitely. I'm interested in checking it out. Because the Primordial stuff I've heard was cool, but just too polished. It was just too Century Media for me or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. It's But yeah, so this is some of that getting incorporated back into more underground stuff, and it's pretty cool to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's cool. No, I mean that's a pretty outstanding part. But so the last one, last sample, this is off Dagger of Night, the final track on the album, and the two best songs on the album are Cloak of Darkness and Dagger of Night, as they should be for the title. And this is going to touch on something that we've touched on like the past 3 episodes, where you were saying there's no such thing as coincidence. Mm-hmm. So there's something going on. There's something in the water in the metal scene right now that we both really like. And this is going to be a good example of it. So let's check out Dagger of Night real quick.
Dude, the autumn leaves blowing in slow motion, man.
So that's one of the most post-black parts on the record, I would say. I mean, it informs the whole record, but that's the one that's very obviously like a sort of French-influenced post-black band. Mm-hmm. But what I want to draw attention to, obviously, is just the length of that fucking riff.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is, I mean, we talked about it with Into Oblivion, we talked about it with Encephalic, I think we talked about it again last week with Ildskare, and now we're talking about with these guys. That's 4 episodes in a row, and it's not like we're seeking them out.
Mm-hmm.
But we're running into these guys who are doing these massively extended melodic ideas from just modern heavy metal convention. So there's something going on. You're right. There's no such thing as coincidence. Clearly, people are picking up on just kind of space and time as meaningful dimensions, and just putting the work into developing these complex, long melodies that require a lot of attention from the listener to appreciate.
Yeah, longer notes. You know, in the first sample I pulled from this band, too, that was something I was going to say. It's like they make it really heavy just by applying tension in very specific parts of this long phrase.
Yeah, that one sort of like chromatic accidental they throw in there, they'll sit on it for a couple measures. And then, it just builds so much internal tension that the resolution with a more consonant melody is way more satisfying.
Yeah, they'll stretch out one note longer than you think you're going to hear it in the standard troped French post-black thing.
Mm-hmm.
Working with longer notes allows you to vary the rhythms, the lengths more, in ways that create cool tension and release things.
Yeah. And there's actually this song, and so the album concludes with a great but also hilarious, like, post-punk style, like, goth rock part.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's great, and it comes out of nowhere, and you're gonna, like, start laughing even though it's amazing. Just because, like, they haven't indicated they were interested in that side really at all, through the rest of the album.
But it's a little bit of a low-key... Once you hear it here, it's like, oh, this makes sense. It's kind of a low-key presence throughout, I think.
Yeah, just naturally in any sort of, like, post-influence stuff. And in Magla, obviously, we talked about, goth rock being a big part of Magla, which is an influence here. So, but I just remember when it came out, I was just like, I just paused what I was doing. I was like, what the fuck? Really? We're doing this? Just in the very last couple minutes of the album, we're gonna whip this out of nowhere?
And what's cool is he really pulls off the vocals.
Oh yeah, it works really well. And
the
lesser
vocals are better than those of most goth bands.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Lesser bands would be like, "Oh, I can do this. We need this passage on every song." They don't do that here.
Yeah,
it's
like this is our gimmick. Right?
Yeah, no, here it's a climax for the album, and it's actually earned. And it's so fucking ostentatious and out there, it just makes it that much more satisfying. This really hangs together well as an album, despite the kind of intrinsic differences between the songs.
Yeah, I think that's another direction that people could go, is now that in, basically music in the wake of punk, we have music with these very fixed aesthetics and atmospheres. Trying to branch out and find the variation within that and make records that have distinct characters on each song without becoming Led Zeppelin records.
Yeah, you're not, you don't need to feel strangled by, the sort of form that you've cut out for yourself. You can incorporate these eccentric ideas in a meaningful way.
Yeah, so there's a lot of freedom here, both song to song and just on the micro riff level of why not stretch that part out? Why not throw in a death metal trem here? Why not do some flam on the drums? Right?
Yeah.
Why not kick? Where was that? On which sample was that? Why not just kick a blast beat in the middle of this slow part?
Oh yeah, that was on this one. It's just it's like you got this huge arcing tremolo riff with the slow drums, and then just like a quarter way through this really sort of improper feeling interval, it kicks this blast beat, this super aggressive blast beat in, which is an awesome technique. I love it. It was so weird.
Yeah, it doesn't really speed it up. It drives it home.
Yeah. It's like it's arcing downwards into its final point of impact, and I really like this record.
I guess, having talked about it with you and listening again today, I think it's just the parts that aren't that good really don't matter very much.
Yeah, for instance, I think the middle song, The Celestial Slaughter, is kind of an obvious weak one in the bunch. It just, it can't really figure itself out. It's it's doing some post-black stuff that I don't really like. But, I mean, minus that,
The first track is... Neither of us picked the first track. I would say the first track is kind of unremarkable, but it's good.
Yeah, it's fine. But
when you hear the first track, you'll get the formula for the rest of the record.
It's just kind of setting the pattern to go forward. But then, I was but there are parts of this that are really transcendent from the pack. And hopefully some people will pick up on these guys, because I think they actually have a lot to offer.
They only have one supporter on Bandcamp. I'll definitely throw for this at some point as soon as I can.
All you listeners, fix that. Get this in your collections. This is worth listening
Visions. It's also got a beautiful cover. I wonder how that works on the tape. There's the label is Blood Red Distribution.
Yeah, just it seems like a small kind of hobby label. Only does a few releases a year.
Ukrainian tape label. Well, I think I'm definitely gonna talk to one of our friends and see if they can do a U.S. run of this.
Oh, definitely.
I can think of a couple who'd be interested.
Definitely. So,
cool.
Very good record. We'll take a quick break, and we'll get to our final record of the night.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, we are back with our final album of the night. Dressed in Streams, Swaraj, or Self-Rule on Colloquial Sound Recordings. And I guess you have some, material background knowledge about this label and the guy who may or may not, but probably is behind this band.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, yeah, he has his name on most of his projects. This one does not have a name on it. I will just say it sounds like the guitar style I've heard in A Pregnant Light. There are definite guitar style similarities. So if it's not him, it's somebody he knows well.
Yeah.
But this is a he's based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I first became aware of it back in 2011 or something, when it was becoming popular. And his whole thing was using black metal in this kind of hardcore-ish framework, and not really sort of aggressively not giving a fuck about it, you know?
Yeah, so
sort of not only going for... Some bands will say, oh, of course we never pretend to be a black metal band, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Going a step further than that and, like, calling it, like, purple metal and putting out tapes with these, like, pastel colors and shit that, you know, definitely rubbed people, including yours truly, the wrong way.
Yeah. So, well, you said something about it's like he's kind of, like, deliberately fucking with people. In certain ways.
I think, yeah, he doesn't have the same kind of, you know, he doesn't have... It's not the same kind of shitlord persona of, like, Host or from Toga or, like, or Seth Putnam or something.
It's more Morrissey.
Yes, I think he really likes Morrissey. Yeah.
Oh, well, based on pictures of the guy, I would fucking assume so.
Yeah. Yeah, so he wants to sort of be, like, yanking people's chains in these kind of simultaneously subtle and heavy-handed ways.
Yeah.
And, you know, take that for what it's worth. I think in terms of the aesthetic of the presentation, right, like, this tape's cover, what is it? It's, Dresden Streams, it's like light blue periwinkle?
Yeah.
Periwinkle with Times New Roman, so it's like... The weird thing is that this now doesn't seem that unusual. Because if you look around on Instagram, it's full of these bands. And at this point, I'm not sure it even reflects on the quality of the band, per se. There are just all these sort of deluxe tapes that are being released in all these kinds of bright, nice colors.
Yeah.
Which, you know, for certain labels, like Old Mill deliberately has their, like, we're going to use colorful things thing, and it has a kind of coherent, folky palette.
Yeah.
Some of this other stuff I really don't understand.
Well, I guess this is sort of
this guy started it.
This is a sort of perfect inversion of, like, mannered vampiric slop black metal from New England, you know?
Yeah, and yet they both have the same cover at this point.
Yeah. It's, so, this... Oh, Jesus Christ, where do I begin with this? I like this album's music. It's just, I have just such a simmering resentment for every other part of its presentation.
Yeah, because I was more familiar with the label, I think I kind of just like... so our patron Josh suggested this. As soon as I clicked on it, I was like, oh, it's this guy. I was like, what to expect, sort of.
Well, it's interesting because what you're saying, I mean, this actually predates Sunbather by a couple years. Like
his older stuff?
Yeah, his older stuff. So he was, like, on the ball with that whole sort of, like, fucking Morrissey aesthetic, like, before, you know, Death Heaven caught up to it and made it a mainstream thing.
Yeah, so, I think he was pretty... I think this guy has low-key been really influential, for better and worse. And what makes his stuff, like, he's best known for A Pregnant Light. What makes that different from something like Death Heaven is that it's anchored in hardcore-isms, maybe kind of like modern hardcore-isms, but it has, like, kind of breakdowny things, and it has this kind of post-to-Slav Black Pipeline stuff with these kinds of sliding minor chords, and he uses these to make what I think he wants to be kind of like honest heartland American kind of music, like
very, very deeply kind of suburban emo.
Yes, suburban desolation music. Yeah.
So this is more distinctly on the black metal side. I don't have any compunction about saying this is a black metal record.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Clearly, it's you know, it's informed by all the post stuff, and it's informed by emo and all the stuff. But this is actually probably more than most of the bands that you would see with a cover like this is black metal.
Yeah,
and it's pretty good black metal. And God, it almost fucking pains me to say it because there's everything about the presentation of this stuff in this band just like pisses me off on such an intrinsic level, but I think that's the idea. It's supposed to piss people like me off, right?
Yeah. And I think, I think I had my moment of being pissed off, and now I just sort of like deal with it by compartmentalizing. I just say, here is this guy in his box doing his thing.
We're describing the reaction addressed in streams the same way people describe like dealing with being molested or something.
No, I mean, so I really like this record. I mean, I would say my reaction is more just to the overall vibe with the label and the presentation.
Yeah.
With this record, to refresh people, especially if they didn't listen to the beginning, and I guess there is something kind of, frustrating about this too, which is like, hey, what if you did a Blazebirth Hall worship band that was about Indian freedom fighters?
Yeah.
Or Indian, the Indian nationalism.
Yeah, just like Hindu nationalist stuff.
And it focuses on stuff that's conveniently distant, right, in the 40s and 50s.
Versus my Tulsi Gabbard themed EP that will
Tulsi Gabbard speaks truth to power. 15 songs in 10 minutes.
Yeah. So we should probably just like start with a sample, shouldn't we?
Let's go.
Okay, so I've got actually you've got one like an earlier.
Oh yeah, I wanted to show where this started. So basically, this project no longer sounds like BBH worship.
Mm-hmm.
This song started in the tradition of kind of American raw black metal guys worshiping Blazebirth Hall. It sounds also like it's already influenced by Americans doing this. So this is from 2012.
Yeah.
Which is pretty ahead of the curve on that, but it already sounds kind of like Laskovic or something.
All right.
So just super BBH with all the most, quote, glorious or triumphant parts.
Yeah.
All right. So this is April 1941, parentheses, Berlin. From the Azad Hind demo.
right, so that is, again, it pains me to say it, that's really good. Fucking, but yeah, I get what you're getting at with the, it is kind of the most glorious parts of BBH, but then it's also kind of like informed by, one thing that it reminded me of a lot was Sanguine Eagle. Weirdly enough.
For sure. And so this was 2012, before Sanguine Eagle existed.
Yeah. No, he's got a really good idea about, about how to kind of assemble this stuff in a musical space. He's got a really good sense of production and how production interacts with the way the notes are perceived. So it gives it this like swirling kind of dreamy quality, which really punches up things that with a flatter production might be kind of stock. But let's get to this record and we can get an example of that. So this is probably my favorite song on the record. This is called Tryst with Destiny. So let's just listen
Sensual.
So let's just listen to the opening of this track and we'll talk about it a little bit.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge.
So we've been talking, like, since that conversation started with the Toad Eater, where do you take these ideas? Well, this actually reaches back into some sort of, like, mid and late 2000s, like, hyper-speed, minimal, melodic black metal stuff that was going on. Just, like, bands that don't matter, that disappeared very quickly, but they would release a couple demos of just this, like, drum machine blasting and just these simple looping but weirdly ornate riffs for 10 minutes. Basically it's post Forest.
If you took some of the density out of that chording, especially at the back end, it's just a rock progression at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And like there's something about that being kind of so wrong it's right. If you sort of, if the blasting, the crazy mechanized blasting is intense enough and it's sort of delivered with enough conviction, the fact that it has this kind of, the fact that it sounds unusually rockish just gives it that kind of like, absurd OTT, like ignorant quality you get in some of the Blaze Berthal stuff, right?
Yeah, it's got this like, it's so resolute in the idea. It's like there's a real power. I mean, we've talked about like let's do full spectrum stuff, and that's definitely a route to go. But there's a real power, and there's a whole band to make out of that section. There is a whole band, and honestly, there have been whole bands of that section, but there is a place for a whole band to really capture the public zeitgeist. And it's really a matter of very subtle things like knowing the production extremely well. How do we make these minimal songs of 3 riffs in 10 minutes grip people all the way through?
Oh, you might like Overvintron.
What? I like it. You always come out of left field with these shit I've never heard of. Overvintron?
Well, I have been, I listen to a lot of black metal. They're, I think he's Welsh, although, German name, black metal being what it is. And it's like, it has, the riffs aren't as good as these, but they're sort of like, that kind of, Franco-Finnish thing stripped of almost everything that gives it a sort of minor tonality.
Yeah,
So just like straight sort of pentatonic epic, like in the red garage band drum machine.
Yeah.
And sort of fuzz guitar tone that is deliberately, he like makes a virtue of the fact that it's obviously made on a computer.
Yeah.
Everything's clipping to all fuck. And it's
yeah.
Like this.
No, that's
you'd probably really like it.
Yeah, I'm immediately in love with everything you described. You know, it's just like, you know, but no, there's a real power to, because you do this sort of like horseshoe thing where it's like it gets so major key, but it gets so fast and extreme that it has this like psychotic manic episode quality to it. And that's a really cool idea that more people
I think
should
that's
expand
something
on.
a lot of people in the USBM underground have been interested in for a long time, and this band does it really well.
Yeah, they do. So let's get to one of your samples, because you've got two samples off the same track. You're kind of just like splitting it, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm sort of torn because I would love to play the opening riff off Fuck the British Raj, which is like, for me, my equivalent of what you just played, like, just catchiest riff on the record.
You see, that's weird, because like, Fuck the British Raj, I thought was like the weakest track on the album, so that's interesting.
Oh, I don't think that riff develops particularly well on that song. Like, there's a kind of breakdown, and then there's the kind of I can relate to this problem. It's like, well, now we're in the breakdown. How do we get out?
Yeah.
But I really like the riff at the beginning of it. But the song I picked is, in some ways, the least characteristic, but I think it is, it gets at something I really like about this band, which is, okay, so whoever it is behind this band has really good ear for harmony, and what he's doing is he keeps this extremely catchy, could be rockish, could be kind of sweet sounding, could be whatever, too sugary quality that you get out of bands like Migla or Forest or whatever.
Yeah.
But where other people kind of thin them out and get rid of what gives them substance, right? He's building in this whole substratum of kind of new harmonic ideas.
Yeah.
And I think somewhat different from what he was doing on the old sort of BBH worship stuff. And they kind of, on this record, they kind of at least suggest Indian folk music.
Okay.
I don't know that, look, I know jack shit about it, and who knows how much of it he listens to, right? But it at least does a good job of suggesting it. So you get these drone patterns, you get this sort of weirdly major and therefore dissonant sounding raga kind of stuff. You get lines that cross each other in unexpected places so that even though they're very consonant, they create dissonance.
Yeah.
And you get these sort of like swirling melodies that aren't neatly tethered to a rhythm guitar part. And all of this comes out of, he's using techniques that are just intrinsic to Slavic black metal.
Yeah.
But really taking advantage of the fact that he's got two guitars, and both guitars are riffing almost all the time. And by the end of the record, he starts to use it to create this kind of much darker, more frantic feeling. So this is the beginning of Indrani, Radiant Ruby. hear shit like that, my eyes just roll back in my head.
Well, it's so it's interesting because it's so like pentatonic. Like it doesn't feel Indian to me. It feels like Celtic at the beginning there.
I hear what you mean. Do 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 do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I think it's kind of. I mean, I think this music kind of exists in a imaginative space that I'm really interested in, called like. We sort of reach back to the 6,000 years ago to the common root of Indian and European folk music, right? This sort of hypothetical missing, some dudes in chariots out on the steppes sawing on their primitive instruments, and somehow, I think Graveland gets at that territory. There's a war metal band called Scythian who does it extremely well in a much more sort of high production value way. That early Boltzer did it really well. And this kind of is in that territory, I think. I don't think it sounds like raga, right? I think it sounds like, if there is sort of festival village music in India, maybe it sounds more like
primordial Indo-European stuff.
Exactly. Indo-European steppe reptile brain music.
Yeah, I get you.
And so this is much more, this to me sounds more like there's a festival, festival to some local god. Everyone in the village is out in the street. Everyone's playing a fucking weird reed instrument, and they're all out of tune. Yeah. And I'm just like, hell yeah! And then when the fucking metalcore breakdown comes in under it, I'm just like, kill! And so what's cool is that although he's picking these very pentatonic, slightly minor intervals, that in themselves he's kind of pinching and warping the notes, and there's this whole second guitar line under the first one that kind of swells up and intersects with it to create dissonance effects. So, really like that. And then he doesn't just stick there, he immediately pulls it out to one of those huge fucking epic riffs. Which I think is almost note for note a quote on something off of something from Grey Forest and Their Shadows by Volknut.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Which is, a lot of people think they're influenced by BBH, and what they mean is they're actually influenced by Volknut.
Oh, okay. I've barely heard any Volknut, so.
I think, for something like Wolves, it's the missing link between the more crazy sounding stuff and this is what Wolves in the Throne Room heard when they thought they sounded like these Russian bands.
Oh, okay, I get you. Yeah.
It's a really good record. It's you'd like it a lot.
Oh, I'll check it out, definitely.
Yeah. I guess we got the second part of the song.
Yeah.
So at the very end of that sample, you began to hear a thrash riff, and what's happening there is that this kind of pedal point thrashing pattern that was the one under the lead riff at the beginning, that thrashy element is now coming to the foreground. And let's listen to this part.
All right. Right from where we left off. Let's go. what I actually find most interesting about that section is they get into this sort of like almost Spite Extreme Wing punk riff at the very end. Just this very simple blocky chorded thing, which I really like a lot. So, well, what is it that stands out? Because you were talking about the thrash stuff going on there.
Spite Extreme Wing also has that kind of definitely influenced by thrash, but sounds nothing like it.
Yeah.
Kind of like electric thunderbolt thrash. Like on Cosmic Rider in particular. And so there, right, it's like, that's thrash riffing, kind of, but it doesn't sound anything like it. And he's kind of just using it as this furious kind of rhythmic pulse.
Yeah.
And again, and instead of just being like, it's not remotely like the thing a band does where they're like, here, let's do a thrash part, and then it kind of probably kills the vibe. And if it doesn't, it just is this kind of chunk, and then the song starts again. This is like, I think he's got this songwriting method where it's like he prepares ideas in the second guitar substratum, cycles them up into the foreground, so now the thrash is at the foreground, then he brings back the swarming melodic trem around it, and then the thrash recedes again, and we get that so a big kind of Migla hook. I think it's just really, as whatever as the aesthetics around this are, the songwriting is so good, and I think it really is forward thinking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I basically agree with you. I think there's ways to sharpen that up to make it more immediately apparent to people. I think that might be a production thing. That might be kind of a playing technique thing. This is kind of an interesting case where the parts of this album that you're interested in are very different from the ones I am. In terms of like the songs that we've mentioned.
I think I'm interested in the parts you're interested in too, though. I think those are good. Like, there would be a version of this record where I say, oh, I don't like the big hooks or the big sounding parts. I really like them on this album.
Oh yeah, well they're just, well, actually, speaking of McGlaw,
Oh yeah, this is yours. Yeah, what?
Well, I got a sample off the title track, Swaraj, which is this. So this is kind of the, this is the 10-minute epic on the album, or 11 minutes actually, and it's another possible idea for how do you take the wake of McGlaw and turn it into something you can build from, So let's listen to just a middle section off of Swaraj, and let's check it out. It just kind of sprawls out.
Yeah, that's really, you expect a drop, and then it's just like, this is going to keep going.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing about it. This track is kind of singular on the record. So, okay, so like we were talking about with Toad Eater, and we're probably going to keep this conversation going for as long as this podcast exists. So, okay, so you've got Mgła on Exercises in Futility. They have these really cool and gripping and immediate rockish arpeggiated bridge parts. What if you just do a song of those and you drag it out for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because what you get is something kind of like Battlefields by Hate Forest, but way more densely melodic. And it kind of has its own atmosphere. You know, we talked, I think I talked a little bit about the idea of like another direction for extreme metal to go in is like, what if you sprawl outwards rather than behaving in these conventional arcs? Like for when I was talking about Blood Aus Nord, Blood Aus Nord, for the most part, like on Mort, it just kind of sprawls horizontally. You know, it's
even the Memoria Vetusta stuff has a MV2. Like, I remember my buddy showed me, sort of convinced me, oh, Blood Aus Nord is really good. He played me MV2, and the chorus there's the extraordinarily catchy moments of sort of big, glorious melodies, and they're often almost, for a lesser band, they'd be like embarrassingly simple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're just like kind of like big sparkly leads. They could almost be mistaken for post-rock things. But great note choice and timing, and they're just stretched and they're set up, and then they're stretched out in a way that makes them just totally majestic.
Yeah, and there's something similar going on here where none of these melodic ideas are really unique, but
not here for sure.
Yeah, the sort of sparse idea of arrangement and again playing with time and playing with scope is what makes it interesting. Like, I mean, this whole song is basically 3, maybe 4 riffs, and I think they do a thing where it's like he basically just restarts the song from the beginning halfway through. You know, it's like a 5-minute song that he doubled, basically.
I've done that.
It's like a Dechristianized by Vital Remains. You know, like, just start the song over. Fuck it.
Well, you got to kill Jesus and then you got to kill Christ.
Very Catholic. But that's another direction. Is like, what if we take these slow, just bridging parts of Mgła and you build a whole band off that? So you just make these very Spartan, and it's funny because you kind of arrive back at Hate Forest if you do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. Mgła can go to this realm of bizarre parallel universe, 13-year-old Zoomers on YouTube kind of metal, right? Can go to like your Gaerias or whatever, and your Uwadas and your blah blah blah, and to the atmospheric black metal genre that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But it could also go here. And yeah, this is really, I mean, the Mgła thing is undoubted, and it wasn't on the earlier version of this band, and it is on it now. And the parts, some of the parts of Mgła I like best are these parts of With Hearts Towards None that sort of hint at it actually being Slavic black metal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These parts that do have this gesture towards this sort of droning folk quality. Here, that's really brought out. I think a thing that, so you're going Mgła on one side and Hate Forest on the other. I think what this song is a lot like, this has this sort of like, again, really good sense of rhythm. He's got that metronomic drumming, and then the guitars are like straining ahead of the beat a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Creates this kind of like your chest is swelling with kind of emotion and energy or whatever. This track does it in a little bit more of a downbeat way, but I think this is the foil for Dias Lit the Ganges, which is difficult to sample because no particular riff would explain to people how it works. But I think that song is great. And I first played this record front to back, and so I first heard that, and I was like, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. Dias Lit the Ganges is a little more like the chest-thumping version of this. I think what they both really relate to is Memory and Destiny by Graveland, which is Graveland is going towards, quote, epic period, but it's got these long-form compositions, but it's still very raw and still has this kind of nebulously swirling guitar stuff, and also just very pentatonic, barely minor, extremely simple. Like, if you isolated them, they wouldn't be good kind of riff ideas. They just stack on each other.
Yeah, there's this whole... I mean, it kind of depends on, like, getting back to Romantenko. Honestly, the Swaraj, this track reminds me a lot of the shit that we were talking about on the, They Came From Visions, the last record. This sort of, like, peasant melody thing. And it's interesting how Senko kind of...
Yeah, this for sure is also, it's very sort of a populist take on Indian metal. You could do a version of this that's like, Bhagavad Gita dude in his chariot with 8 arms, shooting arrows in 8 directions at once or something. And this is much more like everyone on the banks of the Ganges or something.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how Senko kind of created a couple strains of Slavic black metal on his own. Because there's a hate for a strain, and there's a Drudka strain. And then... then for Slavic level, you got like a BBH strain and a Magla strain and a Graveland strain. Yeah. You've got all these different ideas, and there's probably a lot to the ways and the types that you combine. Like, there's probably a really great band to be found in pure Graveland meets Forest, Like, so there's this like incredibly rich. Just like palette of colors to work with, and everyone is just now really catching up to what we've known for a while, which is all these strains exist, and now how do we combine them, and how do we start propelling this whole general idea forward?
Yeah, bro, I had a bong rip thought that dovetails with this, which is like, so taking seriously your idea that black metal needs to be sort of restarting in a certain way, and in a way that responds to the massive influence of Migla in particular. I think what it could do is, it's like black metal actually has enough to reboot from that field of bands. And it's sort of already been doing that, right? At least in recent years. I think this revival of heathen black metal, sort of, aggressive, serious pagan stuff being played with some depth. Yeah. That's pretty new. That's obviously influenced by the Slavs. But, like, this kind of stuff, or voices, or, there's enough range in the technique that you can go a lot of different places with it. There's a real solidity and earthiness behind it. And, if you think about the Franco-Finnish technique, I thought about this, right? It's, first of all, as the voices showed us, it can be incorporated into this style. Second, if you really want to understand its roots in, like, Satanic Warmaster or Sargeist, basically what they're doing is getting a second lease on life for the Norwegian sound.
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
Swedish black metal creates something that fits more into where the genre has gone now. At its best. At its worst and its best. The basic idea of Satanic Warmaster is just remember that feeling when you heard I Am the Black Wizards. How can you do that on a budget, right? How can you do that in this punky underground scene way? Yeah. Basically, the underground BM scene that Norway never had in the latter 90s just existed in Finland. And so I think what's happened there is, like, we both have great respect for the Finnish scene and they're keeping the torch burning, but, like, that sound has subtly influenced a lot of really original bands, Serpent Column in particular, but it's not it in itself, and its influences hyper-melodic French bands, which is cool, but in itself, that technique isn't the way forward.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more depth to be found and sort of a new origin to be found in this Slavic stuff, which people thought they understood. People were saying things like this 15 years ago, but nobody uptook the actual things that made this music good.
Yeah. No, they didn't understand. They got the broad gesture, but they didn't understand the sort of technical work involved in producing it. You know?
or the spirit, the attitude, right?
Yeah.
It's like as secondhand, as sort of like remote and sort of carefully bracketed as this project is, the actual playing, once this guy's got his hands on the melodies and the riffs and whatever, there's at least this very sincere love of the music that comes across. And, that's the interesting thing about the whole colloquial sound thing, is it's on the one hand, it's very, very consciously, maybe dramatically outside black metal, but for someone who's so defiantly outside it, he spends a lot of time thinking about what makes it work.
Yeah, and I mean, that's probably a good place for post-black to go, is, guys from outside of it coming in and then really obsessing over its minutia and then just becoming black metal autists as a result.
Yeah, that's what, yes, exactly. That's a very good way of putting it. It's like, it turns out this band is like much too good at doing the thing it was supposed to reference.
Yeah.
All
right, so I think that's probably a good place to end it. Honestly, good record. I think I like it more, and I've shaken off some of my resentments towards it just talking about it. So, nice. How do we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think I'm going to listen to this record again. I think I'm going to buy it. This is really, I quite enjoy this, and I'd like to hear more things in this style.
Yeah, it's a good record.
Oh, also, we forgot the last thing we were going to say, which was, one way this could get better, and a little less like, here is my carefully bracketed project.
Yeah.
Listen to what the actual Indians are doing. Right?
Which is mostly insane war noise.
Yeah, listen to Tetragrammaticide or like Apartheid Diva, Retrograde, whatever. And try to, who I like a lot, or like Kapala or all these bands. They are just... This project is a vision of what Indian BM could sound like.
Yeah.
If it responds to the battering insanity of what Indian BM actually sounds like,
yeah,
that'll push it over the edge into sort of like really first-rate stuff, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, let's respond to what's actually going on. So yeah. What do we end with? What's our closing song?
Yeah, there's potential for it. Like in the moments where the drum machine really... Okay, yeah, we got to wrap it up. All right. Yeah. I think, again, it's you. I picked 2 last time.
Let's see. Let me think. Indian... Give me a second. I'll figure it out.
Oh, well, we could do one of these bands, yeah.
I was going to say Tetragrammaticide.
Everyone already knows Tetragramma. Well...
Do they? Do they really?
Hey, again, it's your pick, so if you want to do Tetragrammaticide, do it.
Well, actually, you know what? Let's go sideways of Tetragrammaticide, and we'll go to another, like, bizarre war noise kind of, like, nationalist thing. Let's do fucking Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes.
How did I know? I think they are quite popular on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're popular among, like, internet people, but I think they're worth listening to by serious metal people. Mm-hmm. So, let's go for an older track, probably one that, gets a lot of people into the band. So, Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes, Dehumanizing Cesspool for Future of Humanity.
Oh, the hit single.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys, and we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy.
Cheers.